Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
That's what I'm talking about. It's Wednesday, and all of our guests today, including Ross Tucker, standing by. Brought to you by Able Auctions, our title sponsor, ableauctions.ca. Joined now by Ross Tucker Football Podcast, CBS Sports, and Westwood One. Ross, thanks for doing this, sir, on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday or a Monday. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, we usually do Mondays, but you guys had some holiday up there. I was not aware of that. And then yesterday, I was flying back from my second game this past weekend in Miami when I normally am able to come on with you guys. So here I am on a Wednesday, which is good. Hey, Wednesday sponsors need love too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All your auction
Although I wasn't
needs.
paying attention while you did it, so I can't reference them at all.
Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca.
Yeah, that's always been my favorite Canadian auction company. Still is. Probably always will be. ableauctions.ca. If you need to auction something or buy something in auction, Able is able.
Oh.
Able is capable.
Oh,
love that.
Oh, it just rolls off the tongue. Beautiful, Ross. Hey,
Right.
what do you like so much? You work the Raiders and Browns in Vegas. What do you like so much about those two fan bases? And one of the reasons I ask you that is because, hey, the Raiders have moved around a bit.
Yeah, I think they're top 5 fan bases in the NFL. I really do. And so here's how I sort of look at that. It's obviously the attention, how loyal they are, how much they follow the team, how much they travel to away games. But in particular, for these two franchises, I mean, they both have only made the playoffs twice.
Yes.
Since 2003. Like in the last 20 years, they've each only had 2 playoff berths. Because if people will point out like other fan bases, which are great, Packers and Steelers and whatever, and they're all great too, but do we really think that they'd still be as diehard, still be as loyal? Some of these other ones, I'm not talking about the ones I just referenced, but some of these other ones, with the ineptitude of the Raiders and Browns, I'm not sure. I meet a lot of Raiders and Browns fans. They live and die with their teams. And over the last 20 years, it's been more dying. It's actually impressive that they're still alive, how often they die with their teams.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Raiders moving around. Cleveland lost the Browns and got them back, and they're still supporting them. Hey, switching gears, in what ways did the Ravens expose the Bills the other day?
Well, the run defense. I mean, that's what jumped out. You know, the Ravens came out and said, let's test these guys. Let's see how physical they really want to be. And, you know, the Bills have lost arguably the 3 best defensive players. They're all at the second level of the defense. Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, they're 2 stellar off-the-ball linebackers. And then Taron Johnson, their nickel, who might be the best nickelback in the league. Those 3 guys are integral in the running game, especially when you're going against a team that uses a lot of tight ends and a lot of fullbacks like the Ravens. So what happens is the Bills have backups at all those spots. So the Ravens say, you know what? Let's put an extra tight end in there. Let's put an extra tight end and a fullback in there. Then the Bills have to bring in yet another linebacker to try to match that. Now you're on like your 6th linebacker, right? I mean, most teams aren't going to have guys that are going to have played a lot, have a lot of experience to see things, and or that are going to be nearly as good as the starters. So the Ravens attacked the right place to attack when you're going against the Buffalo Bills, I believe.
Ross, what do you think of the Seahawks in Detroit? Hey, when you score 29 points on the road, you should win. I mean, I know they had injuries on defense, but what were your thoughts on the Seahawks?
My biggest thought is, man, I wish I was calling that game instead of the Dolphins and Titans. I mean, after my Dolphins-Titans game was over, we're driving back to the hotel, and I'm listening to the end of Seahawks Lions, texting Kurt Warner and Kevin Harlan saying, can you please stop talking about how awesome this game is and how many cool plays there are and how good I felt like they were rubbing it in. I felt like they knew I would. Kurt Warner texted back, we're doing it on purpose. We knew you were in the car. So that game was obviously awesome. I think it's a pros and cons game for Seattle. The pros are, man, they really have some offensive playmakers. The way Geno played, Kenneth Walker. I mean, I've never seen anybody do that one run he had over Anzalone, the Lions linebacker. So you got to feel good about the Seahawks offensively. Defensively, I had some questions coming into the year, and those kind of came home to roost on Monday night. But how many times are you going to go against a quarterback that doesn't throw an incompletion the whole game, right?
Right.
So the Lions, they were a buzzsaw on Monday night. If you're the Seahawks, you're happy to be 3-1 after 4, and you just kind of go back to work and you realize that was just a one-time thing. And it was impressive to me on some level with the Lions being that dominant that the Seahawks were able to hang and keep it a game, as long as they did.
Got to keep asking you about the Vikings. We got to keep going. They're 4-0. Great win in Green Bay. They intercepted Jordan Love 3 times, a fumble. I mean, this defense, the offense is doing it too, but wow, what a start.
Right now, if you came down from like Mars and landed on Earth and you were watching the NFL, you would say, wow, this team in purple is clearly the best team in the NFL.
Yeah,
That's how you would think of it, right? And maybe they are, maybe they will end up being. I think we all have a healthy dose of skepticism because of, number one, preconceived notions about the Vikings this year. For example, I thought they'd be last in the NFC North. I thought that it'd be the Lions and the Packers at the top, Bears, 8 wins maybe, and then the Vikings below them. Well, I can tell you this much. The Vikings are going to get 8 wins. I'd be surprised if they didn't. And I got to tell you as well, I'm writing my article this week for the 33rd team about this. I'm rooting for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is representing right now, whether he knows it or not, more than just himself.
Yeah.
He's representing all of the so-called journeymen that might have been able to be more than that later in our careers if we had been with the right coaching staff and the right situation. And it feels like that's where Darnold's at right now. It feels like Darnold is in that sweet spot where he got to the right team with the right coach at the right time, at the right age. Quite frankly, 27 years old. I'm kind of believing what I'm seeing.
Is that the same case with Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay?
Yes. And it's really wild how that happens, right? You think about the Jets have been so desperate for a quarterback for so long, and they moved on from Darnold, right? Mm-hmm. Same with the Panthers. They can't find a quarterback. They moved on from Darnold. They kind of gave him 2 years, but wasn't happening for him. And now the Browns, they paid Deshaun Watson all this money because they didn't think Baker was the guy. And now it's kind of looking like Baker coulda, woulda, shoulda been the guy in Cleveland for the long haul, because that was extremely impressive what he did against the Eagles. I mean, that was surgical. That was one of the best games, I would say, best performances by a quarterback this season.
And Ross, before we let you go, whose quarterback success is most surprising? Darnold in Minnesota, Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, or Jaden Daniels in Washington?
Well, I can't say Jaden Daniels because it was almost unanimous. The guys that came on my show on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, they all raved about him. I mean, you name like a quarterback guru, Greg Cosell, Chase Daniel, Phil Simms, Dan Orlovsky, they all, to a man, raved about Jaden Daniels. And they either outright said they liked him more than Caleb Williams, or just the way they talked, you could tell, or it seemed like they liked him more than Caleb Williams. And he's come out and played incredibly well. We saw what Baker did last year. So I think the biggest surprise would be what Darnold's done so far this year. The Vikings kept telling people they thought this was how he would play, but none of us believed him.
Outstanding. Ross, I know you're busy. You got to get going, but we thank you so much for doing this on behalf of Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. We thank you. Able
is capable. ableauctions.ca. See you guys.
Let me write that down. I'll send it to him.